Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Gaia Mikic, and I'm the Programme Manager at Icebreaker 1, and it's 10:05, so I'm just going to kick us off really quickly. So this morning, what to expect. I will be doing a very quick introduction to what we're up to, and then you'll be hearing from our wonderful team, so from Miles, Emily, and Frank on what we've been up to, a little bit about what to expect and how you can get involved. We are aiming to leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So as we go along, if you do have questions, please do just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. Thanks very much. So as I mentioned, I'm Gaia. I'm the Programme Manager at Icebreaker 1, and our mission here at Icebreaker 1 is to empower decision makers to mandate, measure, and act upon the data flows that enable net zero, by making data work harder to deliver net zero. And our projects are aimed at leveraging the power of data infrastructure to enable the transition to a net zero economy. So Open Energy aims to revolutionize the way energy data is shared in the UK and to create an energy data ecosystem that works for everyone. So as I mentioned, today you'll hear from the wonderful team about things that we've been up to and how you can get involved in shaping the future of open energy. There will be time for a Q&A at the end, so as we go along, please post questions in the chat. And just before we get started, to get to know a little bit about who's joined us this morning, we're going to be running a few polls. So can we please get the first poll up? Amazing. So it looks like the best descriptor for everyone's work today is on the research and development and technical side. Thank you. And on that note, I'm going to pass to Miles.
Thank you, Gaia. Good morning, everybody. I'm Miles Cheetham. I'm working on the membership and policy for Open Energy. So how are we going to deliver this vision that we have of a thriving, innovative ecosystem where data is really hastening innovation and leading to faster decarbonisation of the energy system? So obviously, we understand the technology. Now, importantly, we need to agree what the policies and approach are that are going to make this happen. So there's three main questions that we need to think about. Firstly, what's in it for my organisation? Secondly, what's it going to take to play? And thirdly, and I think critically, what's it going to cost? So to do that, we're developing a membership approach that's built by the sector for the sector. Of course, this needs to be really compelling value for members. So we're starting by thinking about the benefits that we're going to achieve here. We'll provide a really effective energy data search and discovery capability, one that really helps users to contextualize the work that they're doing and make sure they get the data that's really useful to them. And with that, we'll also be providing access to this data through our governance platform. And this is the infrastructure that creates the trust framework for the sector, in which all participants will have confidence about how data is being accessed by which organizations, and with the level of security and access control that will enable data and service providers to really drive faster to decentralization and decarbonization. And we'll be building the supporting services, including a sandbox testing environment to make sure that it works for everybody. So then what are the policies and conditions that I mentioned to take part in this? Well, we'll be building on the work that we started at the back end of 2020 and getting down into the detail on those aspects and aiming to understand what it's going to take to play, what are the conditions that you have to meet, and we'll be drafting a preemptive data sharing license to make sure that access to shared data is easy and common for everybody. And then thinking about that, how is this all going to be paid for? I already mentioned this, and we've already started to think about the principles behind that. This was part of the work we did in the last quarter of last year. So we know that it will be not for profit, it'll be proportionate, but it's an area that we'll really be focusing on from the outset to make sure that it returns value that's absolutely compelling back into the sector. We want it to work for everybody, whether you are a DNO, one of the new energy data service providers that we envisage, startups, or academic researchers. This needs to work for everybody. So we'll be thinking about that and consulting with our membership advisory group to make sure that we really get it right At the end of the day, everybody needs access to this data if we're going to achieve this vision. And therefore, this is an area that we really have to make sure delivers that compelling value that we're looking for. Gaia, back to you.
So on that note, I'd like to pass to Emily.
Thanks, Gaia. Yeah, so I'm here to give a quick update on what's been happening with our research team. And really in terms of initial research in the first sort of month or so of the project, we've been working on two main pieces. The first is establishing a working glossary of terms and common acronyms. So this aims to establish some common language conventions across the project, and also to navigate some areas of discrepancy in terminology use between the energy and digital sectors. So for example, the word aggregator can mean quite different things to people in different sectors. So we're just setting out how we'll be using different terms. This is something that we will put out to consultation soon, and would be very grateful for your input on as and when that's available for consultation. So just a heads up there. The second piece of research we've been doing is to build a more detailed model of sector segmentation. So to really understand who is present in different parts of the sector, what they're doing, what their business models are like. And this has really been constructed with the aim to support research into the data sharing needs of different types of organisations across the sector, particularly perhaps non-traditional players who have entered the sector recently or are perhaps exploring new business models or accessing new value streams in terms of data usage. We're also exploring where there are new regulatory obligations coming into play, particularly for networks to share data as well, and basically to build a more thorough understanding of all of this. So in terms of future research, it's really important to note that this will be steered by our advisory groups. As Miles mentioned, we have two, one for membership and one for delivery. They will both be meeting, I think, on the last week in March. And expressions of interest are still open. There's a link on the final slide of this webinar. So if anyone is interested in joining, please do get in touch as soon as possible. To give you a bit of an idea of what each group will be advising on, the membership group will be advising on things like the contract, key policies, conditions to participate, roles, responsibilities and liabilities, and of course the preemptive license. So any interest in contributing to research questions or advice around those, please do get in touch. The delivery group will be drafting the operational guidelines, feeding into requirements for technical delivery of the governance platform and the data search, examining sort of more day-to-day operational needs, things like security and systems. So again, if that's your area, please do get in touch if you think you might be able to offer some advice. To flag again that we're looking for good representation across the sector. A variety of knowledge and experience is really, really valuable to us. So please do put your name forward, and time commitment for the groups is looking at roughly one meeting per month with some preparatory work, so some reading, and also your response to consultation requests would be great. And yeah, just on the final note, I did mention that we'll be putting certain documents out to consultation fairly soon. So this is a way for us to seek feedback from the sector beyond the advisory group. So we'd be very grateful again for your thoughts. If you can't contribute to joining the advisory groups on a regular basis, but might perhaps like to offer some feedback from a specific point of expertise, please do keep an eye out on our website, so it's energydata.org, and also on Twitter and through our newsletters for upcoming items. Thank you very much. Back to Gaia.
Thank you, Emily. And so just before we move on to the next, hearing from Frank, our delivery manager, it would just be great to bring up our final poll around the biggest motivator for adopting an open standard for data sharing. So this is a multiple choice question. I think all of them are. So please do let us know what it is. And if you are in the camp that selects something else, if you feel like it, please post in the chat and let us know what that something else might be. So just give us a couple of seconds to select the different options. It's looking like meeting net zero is a particularly popular one, which I'm obviously delighted to see. So just give it 3 more seconds for anyone else who'd like to vote in the polls. Great. So on that note, if we could just share the results. So it looks like a clear winner for the biggest motivation to adopting an open standard for data sharing is meeting net zero targets. So good news there. And on that note, what I'm going to do is pass over to Frank.
Thanks, Gaia. Good morning, everyone. I'm Frank Wales, and I'm the delivery manager for Open Energy, which means I'm responsible for part of the technical delivery for the project. And so what we did was, the last 2 weeks, we've been running what we call iteration 0 on our series of iterations during this development phase from March until the end of July. And I like to start any new technical team with a low stakes, simple goal, whose purpose is less about achieving the goal and more about making it possible for the team to figure out how they're going to work together in the coming weeks and months. So we had a simple goal of set up some kind of status dashboard, which simply shows the status of the current services that we have. We already have 2 services available, which were built during the prototype phase. We have a search instance, and we have an Open Energy directory instance. And so the challenge here was create something that just checks to see if they're up and shows that in a very simple way. In the process of doing that, a whole bunch of other decisions have to flow from this. So if you see there's a list of things here, such as picking an implementation language, creating a code repository, building a pipeline, and so forth. So how did we do on all of those? And this is going to be a bit of a rush through the slides here for Gaia. So picking an implementation language, we did. We've settled on using Python as the implementation language, at least for our backend work, because part of what we're trying to do here is not just build something, but build something in the open that we encourage other people to contribute to and use. And therefore, we wanted to pick a language that was likely to be favoured by a diversity of different participants in the open energy sector, and one that they could work with. We picked a code repository to show our work in public, and we've set that up in GitHub. We've created a new organization, in fact, which I'll get to in a moment. We established deployment processes in the pipeline and version control and change history kind of at the same time. We also established a basis for logging and monitoring, which is broadly internal at the moment, but we'll be making that more external as we go. We set up developer accounts to support shared work to make sure that we have control of the different accounts that different people use to work on this. And we've set up internally, at least, and eventually externally, a technical documentation area and some initial thoughts about how we can create technical documentation in a way that supports versioning and releasing in such that people who rely on that documentation are able to declare this, I'm relying on this version of the documentation, and so forth. So if we go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So we've set up an Icebreaker 1 organization on GitHub. If you go there right now, you'll see that there's it says there's nothing public. That's because we're just in the final stages of prepping the first repo in there for being open to the public. If we go to the next slide, I can show you a little bit about where that will be. So the open energy status thing, which we've worked on during this iteration, is there. And we've already got a number of things that we'll start to evolve this status endpoint to be, so that it's always there. And it's always something that will show what is going on with our services as we go. And we're expecting to work in the open in such a way that we're happy to accept issues, suggestions, pull requests from others to help us make sure that we're doing the best work that we can and that others feel involved in it. Next slide, please. And this is the endpoint. You can actually go to it now. It's at status.energydata.org.uk. And right now it is very simple. There's a big green box or a big red box, depending on the status of the endpoints. There's actually 3 there because we realized after we stood it up for the 2 that we have, that they're both up all the time, and therefore it doesn't really show anything. And so we added a 3rd one, which we have control of, which we can bring up and take down just to prove to ourselves that it works, and we can demo that if necessary. Next slide, please. So what we're expecting to start working on in our next iteration, which we start planning tomorrow, is to bring the existing Open Energy Search service properly into Icebreaker 1's own technical environment. and to work with our third-party providers to create a production-grade instance of the Open Energy Directory that has full financial grade security around it before we start bringing in any kind of data from beta users that we'll be engaging with soon. And we're also expecting to start discussing and assessing tools that will support delivery and onboarding. As Miles said earlier, one of the things we're planning on doing is having a sandbox environment, but we also expect to provide a diversity of tools and support for the many different organizations within the open energy sector so that they can bring their data to us and we can discover it and make it available in ways that make sense to everyone. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to state thanks to the new team members who've joined us just in the last 2 weeks, who've made all this possible and done all this work already. We have Tom, Kasia, Tom, and Tom. Just to be clear, we don't have a policy on hiring people who are called Tom. It's just kind of worked out that way. But that is creates for an interesting chat sometimes. Oh, Tom's working on that. So if you have any questions about what we've built so far, if you pop them in the chat, I'm happy to either take them now or pass them to our team. Thanks, and I'm back to Gaia now.
Excellent, thank you, Frank. So we've had a couple of questions come through in the chat, and we'll start addressing those in a second. But just to be clear, if you'd like to register your interest to join the advisory groups or as a beta tester, please go to that link that's on the screen right now. And if you'd just like to find out a little bit more, or you forget the link, it's also at energydata.org.uk. So beginning to address some of the questions, I actually have one that I think I will pass straight back to Frank, which is one on how we're going to ensure that we have the highest grade of security in our platform. So Frank, would you like to take that?
Sure. Well, there's one of the partners we have working with us is an organization that also works in open banking. And so they're already accustomed to creating systems that offer financial grade security. And we're going to be using the same technology, including things like hardware security modules to help us protect access to systems and then internally to protect data. We haven't settled on specific technologies we're going to use to protect data yet, because one of the things we have coming up next month is a data protection impact assessment on our plans for building out this platform over the next few months to make sure that we've brought in appropriate expertise, not just technical, but also data protection and policy expertise to make sure we're building security by design and by default, and privacy by design and by default where appropriate into the systems that we're building. So I can't give you specific answers just now, other than we already have both organizations and expertise in place, and we have the DPIA coming next month, which will be the beginning of our work to make sure that everything we're doing is appropriately secure.
Thank you, Frank. And there's been a question in the chat that has already been partially answered, but I think that we should address so that everyone can, in case you haven't seen the answer. And this I'm going to ask to Miles, and it's around making sure that the membership is accessible. So we've had a question from an organisation who says that perhaps they're concerned about the price of the membership for the Open Energy Governance Platform and how we're going to consider those use cases.
Yeah, thanks, Gaia. It is a really important point, and I think it's essential that here we make sure that it's affordable for anybody who wants to use this data. So what we're doing is we're currently in the process of mapping out all the potential roles in the sector to understand what that looks like, and then we will be thinking about how best to structure the membership in a way that means it's affordable, regardless of the size of organization or the role that you play. And this is the point about it's got to work from an academic researcher with basically zero budget right through to those that can afford to pay for access, like a DNO, for example, or somebody with a commercial interest in using that data. So this is an area that we'll be exploring through the membership advisory group. We will be working through this. We'll be sharing that that kind of structured thinking back and looking for feedback before we settle on anything at all. As we were saying in the chat, absolutely, if it doesn't work for everybody, then it's really not working, and we need to make sure that it always becomes something that people can join, access, use, and get the most out of. So it's high on our agenda. Yeah.
Thanks, Miles. And yeah, I think it's really important to emphasize that what we're trying to do here is build something for the sector and with the sector. So on the note of membership, Emily, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Thanks, Gail. No, just really to echo Miles's comments that I talked a little bit about this sector segmentation model that we're building. This is something that we will discuss with the advisory groups and potentially also put out to public consultation. So just from my perspective as part of the research team, particularly if you're a new entrant to the sector, or maybe you're an organisation offering kind of ancillary services or services that may be behind the scenes in kind of a more B2B environment, and you think that you might get missed out of models, or there's any risk of that, please do get in touch. We're more than happy to discuss, as we really don't want to miss anyone. So yeah, basically channels of communication open.
Thank you, Emily. I think we have time for one more quick question, if there is anything that anyone would like to ask. Rapid fire now. Otherwise, what you can do is get in touch with us via our website. So our contact details are on energydata.org.uk. And so this isn't a one-time only chance. We'll be running these webinars regularly to engage. And in the meantime, we've had a question come in from Ed. So there is a question around, is there a plan for public access to aspects of the data set? Is there a plan for public access to aspects of the data sets within scope? So we've had a kind clarification from Gavin saying metadata should be open data. Frank, is there anything else that you want to add on that?
I don't think so at the moment. The metadata itself should definitely be open. But we do know that it's, particularly for data sets that are in the energy sector, we know that it's possible that there may be some data sets that we can't necessarily disclose the existence of, even because there may be national security or other concerns around them. I'm not completely clear on this, but it's certainly something that I've heard, and therefore it's conceivable that there might be some data that we can't just show to the world, even their existence. But in practice, we want to have as much open as possible so people can see what they are getting into from the outside before they even have to sign up for membership.
Thank you, Frank. So we are at 10:29, which means I'm going to call us to a close for today. But the rest of you, any other additional questions that have been asked, we will be noting down and getting back to. We are preparing an FAQ for the website as well. And please, if you have other questions, do get in touch. And if you have any feedback or additional use cases or anything else you'd like us to consider, please get in touch so that we can make sure that everything we're creating here is, as I said, for the sector and by the sector. Thank you very much for all your time today.